Hey kawan, welcome to EDC Ready. Today we are doing a full review of this guy. This is the CJRB Ria in the carbon fiber scales in the 12C27N steel. Now I got this guy secondhand off of a local guy here in the EDC Malaysia group. His name is Shafiq, and thank you bro for selling me this knife. I'll make sure it gets to a good home after the review finishes. So let's get into some dimensions and calculations. We have here a blade length of this gentlemanly folder of just over 2.9 inches. In millimeter, we're getting about 75 millimeters. We have an overall blade thickness of, see now here, 2.8, sorry, about right over 3 millimeters, or see if I can get this right. There we go, 0.12 inches on my calipers. We are running on a handle length of, see now, this is coming in at 3.9 inches or 99.1 millimeters with a thickness, handle scale thickness, of 11 millimeters or 0.43 inches. So a relatively thin knife in that dimension, and then a total height of 0.84 inches or 21.5 millimeters. I've had some requests by some people to do these measurements in both metric and not standard and the American unit, so I'm gonna do both for you guys here in grams. Now my scale only measures in grams, so I have to do the conversions beforehand. 63 grams, that is about 2.2 inches on this guy. Alright, so anything else I want to talk about this? I've had this guy for about a month and I've done the full disassembly and I've done the first impressions video, so you guys can check that out on my channel. But now down to the full review of this guy. Let's go with our typical format of tip to butt. Let's talk about this blade. This blade is made out of a 12C27N. Don't know if you guys can see that. 12C27N, yeah. So this guy, this steel, it's not a bad steel. No, it has okay stats in pretty much every factor. You know, it has okay corrosion resistance. It is a stainless steel knife, stainless steel blade steel. It has okay edge retention. It's relatively easy to sharpen. I've never sharpened it, but I've been told it's easy to sharpen. It's just one of those knives that it's a very good budget steel. Now, is it as good as 14C28N? No. Is it better than 8CR13 MOV? Yes. Is it better than 9CR18 MOV? I'm not so sure. I would kind of put them in pretty much the same ballpark. This guy not as good as 14C28N or VG10, but better than your 440C or 8CR13 MOV and the likes of that. Okay, so let's talk about the blade shape. It is a full flat grind. Although this is a relatively thick blade, it comes in at 0.12 inches in terms of thickness, and that is only slightly thinner than this guy, the Spyderco Native 5 Salt, and it is thicker than this guy. This is the Benchmade Bug Out. This guy has a much thinner blade stock, and as a result of that, despite it being a full flat ground, it's actually relatively thick behind the edge. Don't get me wrong, you know, most cutting tasks will still be fine with this guy, but no, you're not gonna get the razor thin slicitude that something like the Forge Stinger would have here, for two main reasons. Number one, this does start with a thinner blade stock than this guy, and although this is a full flat ground, it's actually quite a short blade in this dimension, so it doesn't have a lot of time for that thicker blade stock to get to a thinner edge. That being said, it will perform 99% of your slicing tasks, no problem. It's just that if you've had a knife that was slightly more aggressively ground, or a knife that is taller that also has a full flat ground, it is not going to be as slicey as these two guys you have up here. By the way, going to be comparing it mostly with this guy, because this is also a liner lock. And then I'm also, oh, the knife is not here right now, but yeah, I have another liner lock knife. But yeah, gonna compare it with this guy. Next up, the blade shape, I'm not that big of a fan of. I do prefer knives with a little bit less of a belly. This guy has a relatively deep belly. I prefer knives like this guy, and I prefer knives like this guy, which has a shallower belly, meaning that the belly itself doesn't have a lot of curve to it. And the reason for that is because I do a lot of pull cuts, so the straighter the edge, the better you can pierce and then pull. Whereas these kinds of blade shapes with this deeper belly. It's a lot nicer to do these kind of rocking cuts, which is nice, but I just don't do them very much in my life. So it's a nice utilitarian blade. Sorry, it's a nice all-rounder blade, but it's not my favorite blade shape out there. Speaking of which, it does come to a relatively thick tip, and when I say relatively thick, I mean it is thicker than the bug out. Okay, the bug out tip is nice and small, nice and thin, much better for piercing. The firm forge one also nice and thin, great for piercing, and I think it's actually even thicker. Yeah, it's even thicker than the 95 salt right here. So the blade stock here definitely leads to a thicker tip. It is a tip that's going to be more resilient. Will be tougher than a tip from, let's say, this guy, because of that thick tip. But again, my preferences, I do like a slightly thinner knife, especially when it comes to this kind of gentlemanly knife kind of design. One thing I do like about this blade is that you do have this nice etching of the logo, CJRB. Very nice etching. It's very nice and deep. I really like that. Now, one thing that took me off guard about this knife is that this plunge grind right here actually has a sharpened portion. Normally, with a lot of knives, this plunge grind right here kind of just, the sharpening stops right before the plunge grind. Do I have one example? Yeah, there we go. See here. So this guy right here, the sharpening stops right before the plunge grind, so that it doesn't get into this kind of angled sharpening. This guy does that. You can see there, the sharpening kind of goes up into the plunge grind a little bit. I don't know why they do that. I don't know if this has any negative effect long term when it comes to wanting to sharpen your knife, but it has this unfortunate effect that once you disengage the lock, it kind of drops onto your thumb. And I don't know if you can see here, but after carrying this guy for a few weeks, you can kind of see a divot in the actual nail of the thumb itself, which is which is not great. I'm just waiting for this guy to pierce my nail and get onto my skin underneath. So do keep that in mind. You might want to be sure you have very thick thumbnails when you want to dislodge this guy, or you unlock it very slowly and then just let it drop by itself instead of having it drop onto your thumbnail. Now, next up, no jimping on the top right here. I do wish there's a little bit more traction pretty much all around this knife. This knife is actually quite slippery in the hands. I'm used to knives with quite a bit more texturing, and if it doesn't have a lot of texturing, it has, sorry, that's a nail. And if it doesn't have a lot of texturing, it has like a finger groove or whatever for your fingers to go into. This guy doesn't have that. So it's pretty much slippery all around the knife. The thumb stud. Now, I gotta preface this by giving a good reason and a bad reason for why I like and dislike this at the same time. I like to fidget with my knives, as most of us do. Knives are, at this point, working from home. Knives are a fidgeting tool more than anything. So having a thumb stud on one side only has a few disadvantages. First of which is that it is very unambidextrous. So if you are a left-hander, you're gonna have a tough time using this guy, although you can definitely do it with enough practice. Another thing is that you are not going to be able to fidget it. No, you can't thumb flick it and then spidey flick it another way, and then you can't flip it, okay? But the advantage of having just one opening mechanism, well, technically you can two-hand open it, but let's put that aside first, is that you can tune the detent perfectly for that just one way of opening it. So the detent can be just strong enough, just enough prominence for this one action, and you can really tune it. And as a result of that, this knife actually has a really good detent. Maybe not the best, but definitely the top 3 of all the detents I've ever experienced in my life. Now, by contrast, this guy, a great flipper, but the detent is just not as perfectly tuned. It's about 95% there. Okay, whereas if you compare it with another knife, this is a much more expensive knife. This is the ZT-0450CF. Also, one opening method, which is a flipper in this case, the detent is tuned perfectly for that flipper action, and it doesn't have to compromise itself by having to tune a detent for a flicking action. And as a result of that, this guy the detent is just really nice for this action. It almost feels assisted once you use it, because it just fires out and it just pops out. And it does that consistently in every situation. I don't think I've ever failed to fire out this knife, unless I was really trying to make it fail, like that. So, but that was me really trying to make it fail. So yeah, that's just something I like. And some stuff I like and I don't like about this one style finger opening method. All right, let's move back a little bit. The pivot here, it is using, I believe, ball bearings. Yeah, so it's using ball bearings caged in some kind of plastic or something like that. I forgot, but you can check out the disassembly. It is running on bearings, which is very nice. It gives a very nice smooth action. It's very nice and fall shutty. Moving back a little bit, the lock bar tension is very soft, and I mean that in a good way. I mean that it's not like you're fighting it to disengage the lock. You know, it's not going to be very heavy on your fingers, so it's just very nice to disengage, very easy to disengage the lock as well. And that's great because sometimes to strengthen the detent, they increase the lock bar strength, so the pressure of the ball going into the blade is increased to make it stronger. But in this case, the detent ball is perfectly prominent enough to create enough tension in the ball, in the detent hole for it to create enough pressure. But at the same time, it doesn't need a very strong lock for that. So that's a sign of a very good design, which I really like about this guy. Moving back a little bit, it has a feature that I really love in the CJRB McKenna, which is it only has two screws, one front and one back, to disassemble the knife. And all the screws are T8 screws. I really like that. I really like knives that don't require a lot of different Torx bit heads to take it apart. Number one, it makes disassembly a little bit more free-flowing. It's a little bit more easier because you don't need to keep changing your bits. Another thing is that if your bits wear out, you can just buy one bit. You can just buy one T8 bit and just keep replacing T8 bits instead of having to buy T6 bits sometimes or T8 bits sometimes. Like this guy has 1, 2, 3, 4 T6 screws and one T8 screw. You know, my 10 gram Santa Fe has all T8 screws. This guy also uses all T8 screws except the clip, but you can disassemble it using only T8 screws. I really love that. In fact, if the CJRB McKenna stayed as it is, you know, the OD green, the G10, I really like that knife. But if it used 12C27, or let's face it, if it used 154cm, I'll be like over the moon. But if it just used a stainless steel blade for the CJRB McKenna, I would have kept that knife. But I'm not a fan of D2 because heat and humidity doesn't go well with D2. Okay, moving back, let's talk about the scales. Now, this is carbon fiber. There's no denying that. It is full carbon fiber. It is full carbon fiber, but it has metal liners. But the scales itself are full carbon fiber. It plays with the light just like carbon fiber should. But it is the kind of carbon fiber that is sleek and slippery. I do like carbon fiber, but I much prefer, now this is a much more expensive knife, but I do much more prefer carbon fiber that has that kind of snake skin texture of carbon fiber that I really like. It does give a little bit of texture to grip onto, but it also has a nice tactile feeling in the hands. This guy, on the other hand, it has this kind of smooth, glossy carbon fiber, which, to be honest, I'm not a fan of. It does go all the way through. It's not like it's carbon fiber over G10, but you know, just keep that in mind. If you do not like this kind of glossy carbon fiber, you're not gonna like this guy. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, the entire knife is really slippery. I've realized from carrying this guy, I like knives with a finger choil. Not necessarily a forward finger choil, but a finger choil in the back here. And the reason why is because it does add a little bit more grip strength, not grip strength. It does add a little bit better ergonomics into the knife. You can hold it a little bit better in hand. That knife has that. This guy has that. It also has a forward finger choil. The only one knife I have that doesn't really have much of a finger choil is this guy, the Benchmade bug out. But even then, it has a slight little indentation here for your index finger to go into. Couple that with the fact that it has no jimping whatsoever. There's no jimping at the top here, no jimping on the sides here. It is a very slippery knife, and I always have this kind of worry that as I'm cutting through my cardboard, it will just slip forward and then my finger will slip onto the blade. So that's kind of why I haven't been like really using this guy for really hard use cutting. That being said, this is designed to be more of a gentleman's knife. So if you really want to go for really strong cutting, get a Para 3 or a PM2 or a cold steel knife. You know, this is not going to be the knife for that. This is going to be a knife to maybe look great in the boardroom, but not necessarily something you want to use to cut cardboard all day. Now, next up, I do like this little divot here. Okay, this little divot has two functions. It has a space for the thumb stud, but it also gives room for your hand to disengage the liner lock, which is very nice. I do like that it has a lanyard hole that doesn't really show on the rest of the knife. It does have a lanyard hole here for all of you people who use lanyards. I do not use lanyards on any of my knives, but it's a really nicely designed lanyard hole. It does rotate in there, so your lanyards can move about. One of my most favorite features about this knife is this pocket clip. This is, I gotta say, this is possibly my favorite pocket clip I've ever used, because of a few reasons. Okay, so it has an indentation, not indentation, it is a recessed pocket clip. So there is no screws, and then the metal of the clip itself goes into the scales, as you can see there. Okay, and then it also has a nice ramp. Sometimes, like this guy right here has that same feature, but the ramp is really, it's a little bit shallow and a little bit pointy at the tip here, so it's kind of uncomfortable to get your finger underneath there to push it into your into the material of your pants. But this guy does it really well. Has enough of a ramp. It's not as sharp at the corner here. I can have my finger down there, lift it up, and then shove it into my pants, or shove it around my pants. So that's very nice. I really like this pocket clip, and I know that they do come with like a titanium pocket clip. You can go for that if you want to, but I would go for this clip every day of the week. So in conclusion, now there are things about this knife I really like, and things about this knife that I don't really fancy. Now, I really love the pocket clip. Pocket clip is great. This guy carries amazingly well in the pocket. If you're looking for a really small carry, you have it in your pants and you don't feel it, and you don't feel it, both from a weight point of view and a size point of view, this is going to be a great knife for you. Now, if you want more of a gentlemanly kind of knife for gentleman purposes, you're this is one of the best budget options for that. Anything short of a Menandi, a Chris Reeves Menandi, is going to be great, and this is a great option in the budget end. However, if you are a more utility focused kind of person, you want a blade that's either really thin for slicing, or you want a knife that has better ergonomics for really hard use, or for use for many hours in a day, this is not going to be the knife for you. This is a knife that looks great on the table. It looks great, next to your iPhone and your AirPods and all of your productivity tools. And it's a knife that is great in the pocket, but it's not necessarily a knife that you want to carry with you to cut all dang day long. And that is it, and that's why I'm getting rid of this guy, because I already do kind of have one that has really nice carbon fiber. I already do have a knife that is a much more ergonomically friendly knife. I do have a knife that has a nicer blade shape, which I really love, in the 10 gram Santa Fe. And I do have a knife which has which has the disassembly feature of only needing one Torx bit size to open up everything. So this guy is just a little bit redundant for me. And yeah, that's it. That's my conclusion. Thanks, guys, and stay ready.